Zethral pressed his face against the observation window as the planet grew larger before him. Vareth 7 looked peaceful from up here. Blue oceans, green forests, white clouds drifting across the surface. It was hard to believe that 300,000 Corvani soldiers were about to descend upon it. He was young for a military historian. Most of his kind waited decades before being assigned to document a conquest. But High Commander Vel'Oryx had specifically requested someone fresh, someone who could write with excitement about the glory of the Corvani Empire. Zethral intended to do exactly that. The command bridge buzzed with activity around him. Officers shouted coordinates, soldiers checked their weapons, transport ships prepared to launch. Everything moved with the precision that had made the Corvani the most feared military force in the galaxy. 17 species had fallen before them. 17 civilizations now served under Corvani rule. Humans would be the 18th. High Commander Vel'Oryx stood at the center of the bridge, his tall form casting a shadow across the floor. His scales were dark purple, a sign of noble blood. His eyes, 4 of them arranged in a diamond pattern, scanned the tactical displays with calm confidence. "Historian," Vel'Oryx said without turning around. "Come, tell me what you know about humans." Zethral hurried to stand beside the commander. He had studied the files extensively during the journey. "Humans are a young species, Commander. They developed space travel only 200 years ago. They have spread to 47 colony worlds, including this one. Their military strength? Minimal by our standards. They have no natural weapons. No claws, no venom, no armored skin. They are soft creatures. Their bodies break easily." Vel'Oryx made a sound of amusement. "And how many defend this colony?" "Intelligence suggests a garrison of approximately 200 Marines. The total population is 40,000 civilians. 200 soldiers against 300,000. Vel'Oryx turned to face him, and something like a smile crossed his features. "This will be finished before the next sunrise. Document it well, historian. I want the homeworld to see how easily humans fall." Zethral bowed his head. "It will be my honor, Commander." The invasion began at dawn. Zethral watched from a secure bunker as Corvani dropships filled the sky like a swarm of metal insects. The humans had no orbital defenses worth mentioning. A few satellites that were destroyed within minutes. A handful of surface cannons that fired bravely but uselessly against the overwhelming force. The first wave of soldiers landed outside the main colony. Reports flooded in through his communication device. The humans were retreating. Their small defense force was pulling back, abandoning the outer settlements. "They run," an officer announced. "The humans flee toward the mountains." Vel'Oryx nodded with satisfaction. "As expected. Pursue them. I want this finished by nightfall." But nightfall came, and the humans had not been caught. They had vanished into the Valen mountain range like water soaking into sand. Corvani search teams found empty buildings, abandoned vehicles, and cold campfires, but no humans. Zethral recorded his observations. The speed of the human retreat surprised him. They had moved their entire civilian population in less than a day. Such organization suggested planning. Had they known the attack was coming? The next morning, Vel'Oryx ordered a message transmitted to the human frequencies. Surrender terms. The humans would be treated fairly if they gave up now. They would become servants of the Empire, but they would live. The response came within an hour. A single word, transmitted in clear text that every Corvani soldier could understand. "No." Zethral stared at the message on his screen. This was strange. Every species surrendered when faced with such odds. The Velthrani had surrendered. The Korith had surrendered. Even the proud Mythori had surrendered when they realized they could not win. But the humans said no. High Commander Vel Oryx was not concerned. "They will learn," he said. "Send the hunters into the mountains. Bring me their leaders in chains." Far from the Corvani command center, deep in a cave that the enemy had not yet discovered, Danny Briggs gathered his people. He was not a large man. 34 years old, brown hair cut short, a face that carried more lines than it should have. He had been a sergeant in the Colonial Marines for 12 years. He had trained for combat his entire adult life. But nothing had prepared him for this. 200 Marines. That was all he had left. 200 soldiers against an army that stretched from horizon to horizon. The numbers were so absurd that he almost wanted to laugh. "Sergeant Briggs," a young corporal approached him. "The civilians have reached the deep caves. They are safe for now." Danny nodded. "Good. What about supplies?" "We salvaged what we could. Food for maybe 2 months if we ration carefully. Ammunition is limited. Medical supplies are—" The corporal hesitated. "We will manage. We will manage." Danny had heard those words 100 times in the past 2 days. The humans of Verath 7 had lost everything. Their homes, their farms, their comfortable lives. And yet they kept saying those words. "We will manage." He looked at the faces around him. Marines who had watched friends die in the first assault. Civilians who had grabbed weapons they barely knew how to use. Old men and young women and everyone in between. Fear lived in their eyes, but something else lived there too. Something harder. "Listen to me," Danny said, and the cave fell silent. "I will not lie to you. We cannot win this war. Not with the numbers we have, not with the weapons we have. The Corvani are stronger, and there are more of them than we can count." He paused, letting those words settle. "But I did not become a Marine to surrender. I did not train for 12 years to hand over my home to creatures who think they can take whatever they want. And I do not believe any of you came to this colony to live on your knees." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "So, here is what we are going to do. We are going to make them pay for every inch of ground. We are going to hit them where they do not expect. We are going to kill them in the night and vanish before dawn. We are going to become ghosts. We are going to become nightmares. And when the Corvani finally leave this planet, they will remember us. They will tell stories about us. They will warn their children about the humans of Verath 7. A Marine in the back raised his rifle. "Give them hell, Sergeant." "No," Danny said quietly. "We are going to show them what hell looks like." High above, in his comfortable observation room, Zethral began writing his first report. He described the successful invasion, the human retreat, the refused surrender. He noted that final detail with curiosity, but no concern. They would surrender eventually. All species did. He did not know that in the weeks to come, he would learn why humans were different. He did not know that he would watch an empire tremble before a handful of soft, fragile creatures who refused to accept defeat. He did not know that he was about to witness something that would change his understanding of the universe forever. But he would learn. They all would. 3 weeks had passed since the invasion, and Sub-Commander Irith was beginning to feel something he had never felt before. He did not have a word for it in his language. The closest translation might be unease, but that did not capture the cold sensation that crept through his body whenever night fell over the mountains. His patrol had been walking for 6 hours. 5,000 Corvani soldiers, fully armed, moving through the narrow passes of the Valen Range. Their mission was simple: find the human resistance and destroy it. High Commander Vel Oryx had promised that this would be finished within days, but Irith had seen the reports from other patrols. convoys that never arrived at their destinations, search teams that vanished without sending a single distress signal, supply depots that exploded in the darkness. The humans were supposed to be hiding. Instead, they seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. "Sub-Commander," one of his officers approached, speaking quietly. "The scouts have found something." Irith followed the officer to a small clearing between the rocks. What he saw there made his stomach turn. 12 Corvani soldiers lay on the ground. They had been part of an advance team sent ahead 2 hours ago. Their weapons were gone. Their communication devices were destroyed, and each of them had been killed with a single strike, quick and precise. "How?" Irith demanded. "We heard nothing. No gunfire, no struggle." The officer shook his head. "We do not know, Sub-Commander. It is as if ghosts took them." Irith stared at the bodies. These soldiers had been trained warriors. They had fought in campaigns across the galaxy, and something had killed them silently, taken their equipment, and disappeared without leaving a trace. He ordered the patrol to continue, but he noticed that his soldiers moved differently now. They jumped at shadows. They whispered to each other in nervous voices. Fear had entered their ranks like a poison. Far above them, hidden in a crevice that no Corvani would think to search, Katie Marsh watched through her rifle scope. She was 28 years old, a combat medic who had lost her entire squad in the first hours of the invasion. She had not slept more than 3 hours a night since then. Dark circles lived under her eyes, and her hands sometimes shook when she was not holding a weapon. But when she looked through that scope, her hands became perfectly still. "I count approximately 5,000, she whispered into her radio. "Moving through Sector 7. They have heavy weapons, armored vehicles in the rear." Danny's voice crackled back. "Understood. Let them get deeper into the pass. Ryan, are you ready?" Half a kilometer away, Corporal Ryan Vance finished connecting the last wire. He was a quiet man, the kind who smiled rarely and spoke even less. Before the invasion, he had been the colony's demolitions expert, responsible for clearing land for new settlements. Now he used those same skills for a different purpose. "Charges are set," he reported. "Just say the word, Sergeant." Danny waited. He watched the Corvani patrol through his own scope, counting their steps, measuring their progress. The timing had to be perfect. Too early, and they would escape. Too late, and his people would be caught in the open. The Corvani reached the center of the pass. "Now!" The mountains themselves seemed to come alive. Explosions ripped through the narrow passage, sending rocks the size of houses tumbling down the slopes. Ryan had spent 3 days planting those charges, climbing in darkness, working in silence. The Corvani never suspected that the ground beneath their feet had become a trap. Before the dust could settle, the humans attacked. They came from everywhere at once. From caves the Corvani had not seen. From ridges they thought were too steep to climb. From shadows that should have been empty. Gunfire echoed through the pass like thunder, and Corvani soldiers fell by the dozens. Sub-Commander Irith screamed orders that no one could hear. His soldiers tried to form defensive lines, but the humans did not give them time. They struck and retreated, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. Katie moved through the chaos with her medical bag and her rifle. She shot a Corvani officer who tried to rally his troops, then dropped to her knees beside a wounded Marine. "Stay with me," she said, pressing a bandage against the wound. "You are not dying today. I will not allow it." The Marine laughed weakly. "Yes, ma'am." She patched him up in 30 seconds, gave him a shot of painkillers, and helped him back to his feet. He picked up his rifle and returned to the fight. Katie had seen this happen 100 times now. Humans who should have been in hospitals, fighting through pain that would have paralyzed other species. She did not understand how they did it. She only knew that they did. The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, the Corvani patrol had been reduced by 800 soldiers. The survivors retreated in disorder, leaving their dead behind. The humans faded back into the mountains. They carried their wounded with them. They did not leave a single body for the enemy to find. That night, Sub-Commander Irith submitted his report to High Commander Velorix. His hands trembled as he wrote. He described the ambush, the explosions, the enemies who appeared from nowhere. He described the way humans fought without formation, without predictable patterns, without mercy. Velorix read the report in silence. Then he dismissed Irith with a wave of his hand. But Zethral had been watching from the corner of the room. He saw something flicker across the High Commander's face, something that looked almost like doubt. "Historian," Velorix said after Irith had left, "update your records. Include these setbacks, but frame them appropriately. The humans are merely delaying the inevitable." Zethral bowed his head. "Of course, Commander." But as he returned to his quarters, he could not stop thinking about what he had heard. 800 Corvani soldiers killed by a force that numbered in the hundreds, killed by creatures without claws or armor or venom, killed by soft, fragile beings who should have surrendered weeks ago. He began researching human history that night. He found records of their wars, their conflicts, their endless struggles against each other and their environment. He read about battles where humans had been outnumbered and outgunned, yet somehow emerged victorious. He read about their capacity for endurance, their refusal to accept defeat, their terrifying creativity in warfare. And slowly, a new feeling began to grow in his chest. It was the same feeling that Sub-Commander Irith had felt in the mountains. The same feeling that was spreading through the Corvani ranks like a disease. It was fear. In the human camp, Danny gathered his people for a brief moment of rest. They had lost 9 fighters today, 9 names that would never be forgotten. He spoke each name aloud and the others repeated them. "We hurt them today," Danny said quietly. "But this is only the beginning. They will send more soldiers. They will bring bigger weapons. And we will meet them the same way we met them today. With everything we have, with everything we are." Katie cleaned blood from her hands and listened. The exhaustion in her bones was beyond description, but somewhere beneath that exhaustion, something burned. Something that would not let her stop, something that the Corvani were only beginning to understand. Admiral Kothvan arrived on Verath 7, with 200,000 reinforcements and a simple mission: end the human resistance. Restore the honor of the Corvani Empire. Show the galaxy that no species could stand against them. He had expected to find High Commander Velorix confident and in control. Instead, he found a commander who had not slept in days, whose officers whispered nervously whenever the sun went down, whose soldiers flinched at sudden sounds. "Explain to me," Kothvan said, settling into the command chair, "how 200 humans have held off 300,000 Corvani soldiers for 2 months. Velorix could not meet his eyes. "They do not fight like any enemy we have faced, Admiral. They do not hold territory. They do not protect positions. They strike from shadows and vanish before we can respond. Our patrols disappear. Our supply lines are constantly attacked. We have killed many of them, but their resistance has not weakened." Kothvan studied the tactical displays. Red markers showed areas of recent human attacks. They were scattered across the entire mountain range, with no apparent pattern. Each attack was small but effective. Each attack cost the Corvani soldiers and equipment they could not easily replace. "This is impossible," Kothvan said. "Bring me the historian. I want to understand these creatures." Zethral stood before the Admiral an hour later, his notes clutched tightly in his hands. He had spent the past 2 months studying humans obsessively. What he had learned frightened him more than he wanted to admit. "Admiral, I requested permission to study captured human prisoners. What I discovered may explain why this campaign has proven difficult." "Speak." Zethral activated a holographic display. Images of human anatomy appeared, along with chemical formulas and biological data. Humans possess several traits that make them uniquely suited for prolonged warfare. First, their bodies produce natural chemicals that suppress pain and fear during combat. They call this response adrenaline. It allows them to continue fighting even with severe injuries. He changed the display to show brain scans. Second, their minds process emotional bonds differently than ours. When a Corvani soldier dies, his companions feel grief and become less effective. When a human soldier dies, their companions feel grief and become more dangerous. They call this vengeance. The loss of allies does not weaken them. It makes them fight harder. Kothvin leaned forward. "Continue." Third, humans require very little sleep compared to most species. They can function effectively on 4 hours of rest, and in emergencies, they can operate for days without sleep at all. Our soldiers need 8 hours minimum. This gives humans a significant advantage in extended operations. Zethral's voice grew quieter. "But the most concerning trait is their adaptability. Humans learn from every engagement. They study our tactics and develop counters within hours. They repurpose our own technology against us. Their weapons are primitive compared to ours. But they find ways to make them effective." He paused, gathering his courage. "Admiral, I do not believe we are fighting soldiers. I believe we are fighting a species that has evolved for warfare. Every aspect of their biology supports survival in conflict. They are not warriors by training. They are warriors by nature." Kothvin was silent for a long moment. Then he dismissed Zethral with a gesture. The historian left quickly, relieved to be away from the Admiral's cold gaze. In the deep caves beneath the mountains, Samantha Cole organized supply distributions. She had been the colony administrator before the invasion, responsible for managing resources and settling disputes between neighbors. Now she managed the survival of 40,000 refugees hiding in the darkness. "Food supplies for the eastern tunnels," she called out. "Medical supplies to the triage center, and someone please tell me we have more water purification tablets." A young volunteer rushed to her side. "Ma'am, we found another underground stream. The engineers say it is clean enough to drink." Samantha allowed herself a small smile. Small victories. That was how they survived. One small victory at a time. She found Danny in the command cave, studying hand-drawn maps by candlelight. He looked older than he had 2 months ago. They all did. "The children are asking when they can go home," she said softly. Danny did not look up. "What do you tell them?" "I tell them soon. I tell them the soldiers are working hard to make it safe again." She sat down beside him. "I lie to them, Danny. I lie to them every day. Sometimes lies are necessary." "Are they? Or are we just afraid to tell them the truth?" Danny finally met her eyes. The weight in his gaze was almost unbearable. "The truth is that we may never go home. The truth is that most of us will probably die in these caves. The truth is that I send people out every night knowing that some of them will not come back." He shook his head. "That is not something you tell children." In a smaller cave nearby, Private Lucas Grant sat against the cold stone wall, writing in a tattered notebook. He was 19 years old, the youngest member of Danny's core squad. He had joined the Colonial Marines to pay for college. He had never expected to fight a war. His handwriting was cramped and uneven in the dim light. Day 62, he wrote. We attacked another convoy last night. Ryan's explosives worked perfectly, as always. Katie saved 3 lives in the field, including mine when I took shrapnel to the shoulder. She told me I was being dramatic. Maybe she was right. He paused, thinking. I miss my mom's cooking. I miss my bed. I miss feeling safe. But I do not miss who I was before this started. That person was soft. That person had never been tested. I do not know if I am proud of who I have become, but I know that I am stronger than I ever thought I could be. Another pause. The sergeant says we are making a difference. He says every convoy we destroy, every patrol we ambush, every supply depot we burn makes the Corvani weaker. I want to believe him. I need to believe him. Because if this is all for nothing, if we are just delaying the inevitable, then what is the point? He closed the notebook and leaned his head back against the stone. Around him, other soldiers rested, some sleeping, some cleaning weapons, some simply staring at the ceiling. They were exhausted. They were outnumbered. They were slowly running out of everything they needed to survive, but none of them talked about surrender. The word did not exist in this cave. Above, on the command ship, Admiral Kothvan implemented his new strategy. More patrols, more surveillance, tighter security around supply lines. He would squeeze the humans until they had nowhere to hide, nothing to eat, no weapons to fight with. He did not understand that he was playing into Danny's hands. Every patrol the Corvani sent into the mountains was a target. Every supply line was an opportunity. Every soldier deployed to garrison duty was a soldier not hunting them in the caves. The humans did not need to win. They only needed to survive, and every day they survived, they grew stronger. Civilians learned to fight. Children learned to carry messages. Engineers learned to build weapons from scrap metal and stolen technology. Zethral watched the casualty reports climb day after day. He documented each loss, each failed operation, each retreat. He saw the patterns that the commanders refused to see. The Corvani were not conquering this world. They were bleeding on it. And the humans, those soft, fragile creatures without claws or armor, were making them pay in blood for every single day. In his private quarters, Zethral wrote a note in the margins of his official report, a note that no one else would see. I am beginning to think we have made a terrible mistake. Admiral Kothvan stood before the assembled officers, his voice cold with determination. 4 months of failure had brought them to this moment. 4 months of ambushes, vanishing patrols, and endless frustration. Today, it would end. We will deploy all available forces, he announced. 400,000 soldiers in a single coordinated push. We will sweep through the mountains from every direction. We will search every cave, every crevice, every shadow, and we will not stop until every human on this planet is dead or in chains. Commander Kelvoth, one of the last officers who still believed victory was possible, stepped forward. Admiral, such a deployment will leave our bases vulnerable. If the humans somehow break through our lines, they will not, Kothvan interrupted. There are perhaps 150 of them left. Maybe 200. We will crush them with overwhelming force. The officers filed out to prepare their troops. Zethral watched them go, his stomach tight with something he could no longer deny was fear. He had seen the reports. He knew what humans could do when cornered, but he said nothing. He was only a historian. His job was to record, not to advise. In the caves, Danny received word of the approaching army from scouts positioned throughout the mountains. The numbers made everyone fall silent. 400,000 soldiers. Enough to blanket the entire mountain range. Enough to search every hiding place, find every tunnel, kill every man, woman, and child who had taken shelter in the darkness. There was nowhere left to run. Danny gathered his remaining fighters, 187 Marines and volunteers. Some were wounded. Many were exhausted beyond measure. All of them looked at him with eyes that held no illusion about what was coming. "They are sending everything they have," Danny said. "If we stay in the caves, they will find us. They will find the civilians. They will find the children. We cannot let that happen." He took a deep breath. "So we are going to do something they will never expect. We are going to meet them in the open." The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, Katie spoke. "You want us to fight 400,000 soldiers in open battle?" "No," Danny said. "I want us to buy time. The civilians need to reach the deep caverns, the ones the Corvani have not found yet. If we can hold the enemy at Vareth Basin, even for a few hours, they might have a chance." Captain Megan Torres stepped forward. She was a pilot, one of the best in the colony. Her shuttle had been damaged in the initial invasion, but she had kept it flying through sheer determination and creative repairs. "I can provide air support. My shuttle is not much, but it can still fly." "Your shuttle against their entire army?" Ryan asked quietly. Megan smiled, but there was no humor in it. "One good run. That is all I need." Heather Dunn raised her hand. She was 53 years old, a schoolteacher who had never held a weapon before the invasion. Now she was one of the deadliest snipers in Danny's force. "I will need a high position, somewhere I can see the whole battlefield." "There is a ridge overlooking the basin," Danny said. "You will have clear lines of sight." "Good." Heather checked her rifle with practiced hands. "I have been waiting for this." They moved out before dawn. The humans reached Vareth Basin as the sun rose. It was a wide valley between the mountains, open ground that offered no cover, no protection. The perfect killing field. The Corvani army would pour through it like a flood, and 200 humans would stand in their path. Danny positioned his people along a low ridge at the edge of the basin. They dug shallow trenches with their hands. They piled rocks into crude barriers. They did everything they could to prepare for what was coming. Then they waited. The Corvani arrived 2 hours later. First came the scouts, then the advance guard, then the main force, wave after wave of soldiers emerging from the mountain passes. The sound of their march was like thunder rolling across the earth. Commander Kelvoth rode at the head of the central column. He had expected to find empty mountains. Instead, he found humans standing in formation, weapons raised, waiting. For a moment, he felt something like admiration. Then he gave the order to attack. The Corvani charged. What happened next would be remembered for generations. The humans did not run. They did not scatter. They stood their ground and opened fire with everything they had. The front ranks of the Corvani fell like wheat before a scythe. Behind them, more soldiers pressed forward, climbing over the bodies of their fallen comrades. Heather Dunn found her rhythm. Her rifle cracked once, twice, 3 times. Each shot found its target. She aimed for officers, for communication specialists, for anyone who looked like they were giving orders. The Corvani chain of command began to collapse. Ryan Vance detonated the first wave of explosives. The ground beneath the advancing army erupted in fire and stone. Hundreds of Corvani soldiers died in an instant. Ryan moved to his next position and prepared the next detonation. Katie Marsh worked behind the lines, dragging wounded soldiers to cover, patching wounds that should have been fatal, sending people back into the fight who had no business standing. Her hands were red with blood. Her voice never wavered. And Danny stood at the center of it all, directing fire, calling out targets, keeping his people together through sheer force of will. The Corvani kept coming. For every one that fell, 10 more took their place. They were an endless tide of armored bodies and energy weapons, and the human lines began to buckle under the pressure. Then Megan Torres made her run. Her shuttle screamed down from the sky, engines howling, weapons blazing. She targeted the Corvani artillery positions, the vehicles that were preparing to pound the human trenches into dust. Explosions bloomed across the battlefield as her missiles found their marks. The Corvani turned their weapons toward her. Energy beams sliced through the air. Her shuttle shuddered as it took hit after hit. "Megan, pull out!" Danny shouted into his radio. "Negative, Sergeant." Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. "I have one more target." She aimed her damaged shuttle at the Corvani command position, where Commander Kel Voth stood directing his forces. She pushed the engines to maximum and did not look away. The explosion was visible from orbit. Commander Kel Voth died without ever understanding what had happened. His entire command staff died with him. The Corvani offensive faltered as units lost contact with their leaders, as orders stopped coming, as chaos spread through the ranks. But the humans had paid their own price. Megan Torres was gone. So were dozens of others who had fallen in the fighting. Danny looked at his remaining forces and saw less than 100 people still standing. The Corvani regrouped. A new commander took charge. The attack resumed. Heather Dunn fired until her ammunition ran out. Then she drew a knife and waited. Ryan Vance detonated his final charges, burying an entire battalion under tons of rock. Katie Marsh dragged another wounded soldier to safety, then picked up a rifle and joined the front line. And still, the humans did not break. The battle lasted until sunset. When darkness finally fell, 60,000 Corvani soldiers lay dead on the field. The human survivors numbered 88, but they were still fighting. Admiral Kothvin watched from orbit, his face expressionless. He had expected a quick victory. Instead, he had witnessed the most costly single engagement in Corvani military history. Zethral stood beside him, recording everything. "What are these creatures?" Kothvin whispered. Zethral had no answer. He had studied humans for months. He had learned their history, their biology, their psychology, but nothing had prepared him for what he had seen today. 200 humans against 400,000 soldiers, and as night fell over Verath Basin, 88 of them still stood, still fought, still refused to die. For the first time in the history of the Corvani Empire, an admiral began to consider retreat. Grand Admiral Sirvex commanded the Corvani Third Fleet, 100 warships, carrying 2 million soldiers. He had conquered 11 worlds in his career. He had never lost a campaign. When he received orders to pacify Verath 7, he expected to complete the mission within days. He arrived to find chaos. Admiral Kothvin's reports told a story that Sirvex could barely believe. 6 months of fighting, hundreds of thousands of casualties. An enemy force of 200 that had somehow survived every attempt to destroy them. And now, those survivors had retreated into tunnels so deep that orbital bombardment could not reach them. "This is unacceptable," Sirvex declared from his command throne. "I will not allow a handful of primitives to humiliate the Empire any further. Prepare for planetary sterilization. We will burn the surface clean and be done with it." His officers hesitated. Zethral, who had been transferred to the flagship as the official historian of the campaign, stepped forward. "Grand Admiral, with respect, such an action would destroy the colony's infrastructure. The mining facilities, the agricultural systems, everything that made this world valuable." "I do not care about infrastructure," Sirvex interrupted. "I care about victory. And if we cannot have victory on the ground, we will have it from orbit." Before he could give the final order, an alarm pierced the bridge. Sensor officers shouted warnings. Something was approaching the fleet at high speed. A single human shuttle. It was small, battered, barely holding together. It should have been destroyed instantly by the fleet's defensive systems, but it moved with desperate speed, weaving through weapons fire with skill that seemed almost supernatural. And then it was through. The shuttle docked with the flagship before anyone could stop it. Security teams rushed to the airlock, weapons ready. When the doors opened, they found a single human standing inside. His name was Connor Wells. He was 26 years old. He had been a Marine on Vareth 7 before the invasion. Now he was the last member of his squad, wounded in a dozen places, standing through sheer willpower alone. In his hand, he held a data chip. "I have a message," he said. "From Earth." They brought him to the bridge at gunpoint. Grand Admiral Siervex stared at this broken, bleeding creature with something between disgust and curiosity. "Speak your message, human, then die." Connor smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "My message is on the chip. Play it." Siervex gestured to a technician. The data chip was inserted into the ship's systems. A holographic display activated, showing a human male in a military uniform. "This message is for the commanders of the Corvani fleet," the recording said. "My name is Admiral Christopher Lane of the United Earth Defense Force. 6 months ago, you invaded our colony on Varath 7. You expected an easy victory. Instead, you found something else." The display changed. Ship schematics appeared, weapon specifications, fleet deployments. "This is the Earth Defense Fleet, 2,000 warships, 50 million soldiers, technology that your species has never encountered. We are coming to Vareth 7, not to negotiate, not to establish peace. We are coming to demonstrate what happens when humanity stops holding back." More data flooded the screen. Human military history. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, chemical agents, digital attacks capable of shutting down entire civilizations. The humans you have been fighting for 6 months were civilians, farmers, teachers, shopkeepers. They had 200 Marines and whatever weapons they could salvage. And they held off 500,000 of your best soldiers for 6 months. Admiral Lane's face returned to the display. His expression was cold. "Imagine what happens when we send actual warriors. Imagine what happens when we use our real weapons. Imagine what happens when 4 billion humans decide that your species has made itself our enemy." The message ended. The bridge was silent. Zethral could not breathe. He had studied human history. He had learned about their endless wars. But he had never truly understood until this moment. The technology the humans on Varath 7 had used was generations obsolete. Their weapons had been primitive by human standards. They had been fighting with one hand tied behind their backs, and they had still nearly won. Connor Wells swayed on his feet but remained standing. Blood dripped from his wounds onto the pristine floor of the command bridge. He looked at Grand Admiral Siervex with eyes that held no fear. "You have 1 hour to begin your retreat," he said. "After that, what happens next is out of my hands." Siervex stared at the human, then at the data still displayed on the screen, then at his officers. He saw fear in their eyes, fear that he felt echoing in his own hearts. "Prepare the fleet for departure," he ordered. "We are leaving. Not just this system, the entire sector. We are leaving." No one argued. As the Corvani ships powered up their engines, Connor Wells collapsed. Medical teams rushed to save him, not out of mercy, but because he was suddenly valuable, a potential source of information, a symbol of everything the Corvani had learned to fear. In the mountains of Varath 7, the survivors emerged from their hiding places as the enemy ships disappeared from the sky. Danny Briggs stood at the mouth of a cave, watching the lights of the retreating fleet grow smaller and smaller. Katie stood beside him. Her hands were still stained with blood that might never fully wash away. Behind them, the civilians they had protected began to cry, to laugh, to embrace each other. "Is it over?" someone asked. Danny did not answer immediately. He thought about everyone they had lost: Megan Torres, Heather Dunn, who had died in the final days of the siege, Ryan Vance, who had given his life to buy time for the evacuation, dozens of others whose names he would carry forever. "This part is over," he finally said, "but I do not think the Corvani will forget us, and I do not think we will forget them." In orbit, aboard his shuttle that would carry him home, Zethral began writing his final report, the one that would be required reading in every Corvani military academy, the one that would be translated into 100 languages and distributed across the galaxy. He titled it, "Why We Must Never Fight Humanity Again." He wrote about their endurance, their adaptability, their refusal to accept defeat. He wrote about the bonds that made them stronger instead of weaker when allies fell. He wrote about the fury that lived behind their soft eyes and gentle smiles, but most importantly, he wrote about what he had finally come to understand. Other species fought to survive. They calculated odds, assessed risks, and surrendered when the numbers turned against them. This was logical. This was rational. This was how civilized beings waged war. Humans did not fight to survive. They fought to win, and they did not understand the concept of acceptable losses, because to a human, every loss was personal. Every fallen comrade was a friend, a brother, a sister, and every personal loss demanded vengeance. The Corvani had killed many humans on Verath 7. In doing so, they had not weakened humanity. They had awakened it. Zethral ended his report with a warning that would echo through Corvani history for generations. Do not mistake their kindness for weakness. Do not mistake their mercy for surrender. Do not mistake their silence for defeat. Humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of their strength, but because they will never, ever stop. They will hunt you across the stars. They will follow you into the darkness. They will sacrifice everything they have, everything they are, to make you pay for what you have done to their people. And they will not rest until you understand why they inspire fear. Far below, on the surface of Verath 7, Danny Briggs watched the sunrise. The first sunrise in 6 months that did not bring the threat of death. Around him, his people began the long work of rebuilding, burying their dead, healing their wounds, turning a battlefield back into a home. They had won, not through strength, not through numbers, but through something the Corvani would never understand. They had won because they refused to lose. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the Corvani fled toward home, carrying with them a new understanding of the universe. Humans were not to be conquered. They were to be feared.